people 5 feet away from me. But Pastor, thank you. You can't hear this? Really? Anyway, Pastor gave me the option to either follow up what he was going to do or what I felt like I wanted to do, which was not do this at all. But I have a hard time remembering anything anymore. I used to be really good at memorizing. Usually when I did something, I knew the subject matter pretty well. But it took me 5 days to memorize my date of birth, so you can catch on that I'm not too swift with this. But anyway, this is basically from a book study from an author. Her name is Jenny Allen, and it's in that app that we have that we can go to. And it's a 7-week production that covers everything about community and how community used to be and how it is now and how to get back to community. And she takes things from Genesis basically on how it started and how God created the earth and, you know, who the first couple was and the first family and how all that was created. But she also went heavily into, we're an individualistic society now, where everybody does their own thing. Everybody doesn't really look to ask for help anymore. They pretty much do it on their own. And she said loneliness is one of the number one issues in America today, that 3 out of every 5 people are lonely in the United States today. And she said that is rising. Now, some of that could have been due to COVID, when everybody was really isolated, but she said that was taking place even before COVID came in. And of course now we go into our homes, we close our door, we fix our own food or for our family, we sit down and we watch TV, we listen to the news. We don't really know what the person across the street's doing. We don't know what the person next to us is doing. Even if we've lived in a neighborhood for years and years and years, we really don't know our neighbors unless we grew up with them. So that neighborhood society or that village community that used to take place is pretty much non-existent now. So those are some of the things that she went into, and some of the things that she'll go through over the 7-week course are proximity, transparency, accountability, shared mission, and consistency. And it takes all 5 of those things to develop a village. And based on her research and everything that I looked at, in order to get back to that, we have to get back to this. And she was very, very clear about God's plan is really a perfect plan. And I wanted to read the definition of, I'm going to give you 2 definitions of community, and you can tell me which one sounds more like it's from the church or which one sounds more like it's scientific. First one is a group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristic in common. The other, if I can find it, is a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. Now, out of those 2 definitions of community, which one do you think is more church-oriented? The second one, you're exactly right. And it's funny that we even have a community that's designated scientific now. But that's pretty much how we are right now. And even today, we don't have just one community, 2 communities. We got 5. We got 5 different communities, and one community is based on interest, another is based on action, another is based on place where you live, the other is based on practice, and then the other one's circumstance. So each one of them has a different definition of who lives in that particular community. So basically, we're all doing something different. And then she brought up, after the isolation part of it, was the individualism. And you can kind of look around everywhere now, and I can use athletics as a great example, and I'm sure Dave and Sean, you can relate to me now. When you watch even college athletes now, even high school athletes now, or pro athletes, it's all about them. They'll they'll make a particular play that's, pretty decent play, but they'll act like they just won the World Series or a national championship, and they're strutting around. And what drives me nuts is somebody going into the end zone makes a touchdown, and the first thing they do is this, and they're not even Catholic. So basically, it's all for show. So that's kind of how we are now. We don't have tight communities, and we've really built our own little worlds to live in, and that's not what God wanted us to do at all. So another thing that she talked real heavily about was friendship. How do you make friends? So you have to make friends in order to create a community. So how do you make a friend? Anybody? You do. You have to literally go introduce yourself, and then you have to start a conversation, and it takes time to develop a friendship. Now, today, everybody has a lot of associates, people they know but they don't know anything about. And we've got to kind of overcome that. And we've got people who are so individualistic or so isolated that even when they come into a setting like this, you'll see people sitting way back in the corner over here. You'll see them way back in the corner over here. They're even isolating themselves in church, and they're not developing that community feel. So, and a lot of things, we don't ask for help. People today are almost afraid to ask for help unless they're at a point where they're incredibly desperate or they're a criminal. I agree. And why do you think that, Dave?
Oh,
Why do you think?
I think sometimes she's telling me I got to speak up. I think sometimes people are embarrassed to ask for help. They're afraid somebody will make fun of them, or, well, you ought to know that, you dummy. I mean, everybody knows that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a good point. Anybody else? Anybody else? Afraid of it?
Chris.
Please say that again. Thank you.
Oh,
I was going to say, people are typically afraid to ask for help because it's that fear of rejection. If I ask for help and they say no, people are just afraid of it, so they don't even bother to ask.
That's a good point, but why?
Yes, good question.
Yeah, it is. That's why I ask it.
Honestly, I think it has a lot to do with, our pride. Comes a lot into play into it. Either we're too prideful to just say, you know what, I can't do this on my own, I need help. Or it's that it's the society portion that says you should be able to handle this, whatever situation it may be, regardless. You should be able to deal with on your own. And society's put heavily on being self-oriented when that's not the way we've been designed.
That's true. God says we are not to live alone. He did not make us for that. Did you want to add something, Jasmine?
I just want to say sometimes people grow up in a family or like in their childhood where they didn't express, feelings like when they were little, so they weren't really taught to express their emotions, etc. So that's why they wouldn't, ask for help.
That's a good point, too.
I think sometimes people don't want to ask for help because they don't want to ask for help because they feel like their peers are going to be judgmental towards them and embarrass them. So it's just going to, maybe a bad situation is going to become worse. So.
That's true, because we're not judgmental at all, are we? I mean, that just doesn't happen. What makes people feel lonely? Anybody?
Isolation.
Isolation? Why are we isolated?
Yeah, in some ways we are. Look what happened with the pandemic. I mean, we were isolated whether we wanted to be or not. It was the path we were supposed to take to be on the safe side of certain situations.
That's true.
No.
And here's the funny thing. Never in civilization have we been more connected, and yet we're more isolated. How can we be so connected that we're still isolated? What do we have now that people are so in tune with? They can't put it down. They have to check it.
Technology,
Right.
yeah.
Technology,
Yeah.
social media, your phone, text. Teenagers, they can't live without them. That's basically the only way that they communicate now is with their text message. And one of the reasons is if they get a text message, they don't have to respond to it right away. They don't have to step up and speak to that person. That's why you rarely see teenagers actually use the phone to call somebody and talk to them, because that would be an interpersonal relationship where they have to go head to head, which is why when they're in public, they're socially awkward. They don't know how to speak. They don't know how to talk to people because all they're ever doing is texting. That's how they do it. So they pretty much isolated themselves from everything, and they do things when it's convenient for them, and they have been enabled to do that. They're actually encouraged to do stuff like that. And I know some of us slightly older people, we were brought up in a neighborhood, if we were fortunate, and that neighborhood was our community, but the difference was you didn't have to lock your doors. If you went outside, you didn't have to lock your car. If your parents had to go do something, your neighbors would look out for you. They all knew your name. They all knew your parents. Everybody knew everybody. That's exactly right. So if you think about it, you go back to the beginning of the time, everywhere there were small villages. There were a few large, quote unquote, cities, but mostly there were villages where people had to barter. They had to talk to people if they wanted to exchange something for food, because food could have been money, or skins or pelts could have been money. So they would exchange, and in order to do that, they had to communicate with each other. So they had to know each other. And the other thing was, they didn't have to go very far. Everything was within usually walking distance or cart distance, or you got on a horse. But, you know, today we have people in this church, they're coming from Suffolk, they're coming from Virginia Beach, they're coming from York County, they're coming from here, Newport News, and they're still a distance away where they can't get here all the time. So it's kind of like we're a broken community, and we see that everywhere, which is one of the reasons why we have so many churches. Is a lot of it is for convenience of other people in their surroundings, and the other part is the church has now divided itself so many times. Like if a church was 100%, now it might be 5%, where 5% went here, 5% went here, you follow me? And they all are going according to their own beliefs, not what's in here. They're doing whatever fits their beliefs or their personality, so to speak. So everything has just changed. So who was the first family? Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve. But God was a family unto himself. How? The Trinity, right. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. He was three people. So he was really a family within himself, and then he created Adam, and we all know how that story turned out. And Eve and their community was in the Garden of Eden, where they didn't have to worry about being fed. They didn't have to worry about what time it was, where they had to be somewhere. They didn't have to worry about anything at all. I mean, everything was there. It was perfectly what it should have been, what God intended it to be. So when Eve came into the picture, that was the beginning of the family. Now, when they messed up, you know what happens after that. He sends them to earth, but they are allowed to have children. Those children multiply, and then we have people all over the world that started from those two people. So he still allowed that to happen. And in Genesis 1, in the beginning, God existed in a community within himself. And, you know, after that, Genesis 2:18 through 25, after God created one person on this earth, Adam, he said it is not good for man to be alone. And this is a truth we all feel in our own lives. We know it's not good to be alone. Because when you're alone, that's when the devil likes to do his work, because he's got you isolated. So when he's got you isolated, you might not know you're listening to him, but he's telling you what a fool you are, what a lowlife you are. This is what I want you to do, and we become more and more depressed, which is another reason why isolated people are also more depressed people. And that is a big issue in this country today. And suicide is now becoming rampant in this country. I mean, it used to be relatively bad, but now it's ridiculous. And it's not just with adults, it's with children, teenagers, military. The suicide rate in military is ridiculous now. It's off the charts. Yes, just recently. That's very true. And Genesis 4, 1 and 2, God creates a family, Eve. So together that first couple have children. I went through this. They're the first community. And it's by God's design, and it's a perfect design. He has everything worked out if we just do what he says to do. And, the sad thing is we knew this design was going to break down because when they messed up, sin entered the picture. And when sin entered the picture, that's pretty much when, pardon the expression, hell broke loose. And in Genesis 2 and 25, Adam and Eve, they lived in the garden with God, and they were naked, unashamed, no shame before God. They were free, beautiful, safe, authentic. The relationship they had was authentic, and they had a task of caring for other creations. And they also had a mission. And, what does all this have to do with you and me? It's longing for a connection. And what was one of their tasks when they were in the Garden of Eden? I mean, they weren't the only ones there. There were actually animals and other beasts there too. Who fed them? Adam and Eve. Who named them? Adam and Eve. So, everything, that's where all of this came about. And heaven and earth actually really happened. But it just didn't last very long. And that was because of a certain apple, a certain tree. And everybody now can see how confused the world is and how separated the world is. And you can go on any social media, particularly Facebook or Disgracebook, whatever you want to call it. And if anybody comes up with a topic, you'll find nobody ever agrees. There's always disagreement. Well, so-and-so did this, but so-and-so didn't do this, and so-and-so and so-and-so. There's no togetherness. There's no one who is leading that discussion except the person who initiated it. And some people do it just to get a rise out of us. And, when heaven came to earth, there were 5 realities, and I already went over those with you, but the proximity part was they were living together and they were connected day in and day out, breath in and breath out, and God is with them. And that was Adam and Eve at that time. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine living with God? Can you imagine living where you didn't have to worry about time, you didn't have to worry about sin, you didn't have to worry about where your food came from, you didn't have to worry about anything. All you had to do was worship God who made you. And he enjoyed the company. The other thing was transparency, and to us that's kind of, when we hear people say this all the time, I'm just being transparent with you. Well, I can't see through you, but I can listen to you. And the Bible says they were naked and unashamed, and they were safe. Are we really safe now? In our own minds, we might think we are, but are we safe from, is there terrorism? Are there criminals? Are there floods? Are there hurricanes, typhoons, tornadoes? All of these are destructive. And none of that was in heaven. None of that stuff occurred. Everything was perfect. So we would know what that is. And they were loved. And not everybody today is loved. And they don't feel loved because that's not expressed to them. And one of the reasons it's not expressed to them is because nobody takes the time to do it, because they're too caught up in their own troubles and their own circumstances. So they don't take the time to invest in anybody else, which is what the church is supposed to teach us to do, invest in each other, and to praise God, and to do what God asks us to do. Genesis 2:23, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. What does that mean? It's pretty simple, actually. Ma'am? Exactly. She's going to make you repeat it.
That we belong to one another.
You're exactly right. Genesis 2:16-17. By following his boundaries and not eating from the tree of knowledge, he pretty much, there would be connection and accountability. And here again, that's just doing what he says to do, which they didn't do. And Adam and Eve had a shared mission. I mean, they were accountable to who? To God. They had been given a mission by whom? God. Their consistency was given to them through God. So everything that they were pretty much asked to do, they did for a while. But the funny thing is, the same thing could happen today. Can you imagine, I mean, this is sound really far-fetched now, but can you imagine if every single person, and we'll just use the United States as an example, if every single person in the United States went to the same church, had the same beliefs, had the same thoughts, had the same love, had the same ability to connect and not isolate, can you imagine the power that the church would have over everything? Because that would be God's will. And the funny thing is, everybody thinks that's impossible. It's really not, but it's just getting all of us to do something together. And that today is virtually impossible. Even something as simple as, I know this for a fact, you put 5 women together and you ask them, where do you want to go to eat? One will say, I want to go here. No, the food is too greasy. Another will say, well, I want seafood. No, well, I'm allergic to seafood. But that's how we are. We can't even agree on where to eat or what to eat. And God didn't have that in mind. He said, compromise if you are not of the same thoughts, so that peace can be with you. And men? No, they're really not. They're really not. Men will agree, and if they don't like it, they'll just leave. So Genesis 3:23, they were kicked out of the garden, thorns and thistles to find, and life was now not on their side. And they had believed a lie. Now, does anybody lie today? Ask a police officer. They get lied to every day. Ask a parent with their own children. And we do all this stuff because we know we've done something wrong. So we don't lie when we've done something right. I mean, we'll pitch a fit if somebody accuses us of something that we didn't do, and we know we didn't do it, but nobody believes us. Because primarily we've lied so many times before that who would believe you? So you have to open your eyes to authority too. And people don't even listen to authority anymore. If it doesn't agree to what they want or how they want it done, they don't listen. The devil has turned us against each other multiple times over. It is amazing the work that he has done and how sneaky he is about how he does it. In Romans 3:10 and 12, there is no one righteous, not even one. There is no one who understands. There is no one who seeks God. All have turned away. That's us. Is there anybody in here who's never committed a sin? You probably haven't. Is there anybody that's never told a lie? Is there anybody that's never gotten angry? I mean, trust me, I can go on and on because I've done them all. But it did not used to be that way. And it's kind of the story of humankind. We've just kind of, we're kind of living in the mess we've made, and, like, we're kind of like pigs wallowing in mud. We're just dirty. That was a terrible analogy, wasn't it? And here are three simple truths. One, you will disappoint me. Two, I will disappoint you. And three, God will never disappoint any of us. Those are as true today as they've ever been, probably more so. In Revelation 7, 9, and 10, and by the way, all of these things, you can go in that study, and you can go through the whole 7-week program. I'm just kind of going through the first part of it, and it's all about community, but you can actually go back and see all of this, because most of you have the apps now anyway. But in Revelation 7, 9, and 10, we learn in heaven we will be surrounded by every nation, every tribe, every religion, and we will all be together. We won't be just singing in some heavenly choir, but living, working, relating, eating, loving, worshiping, enjoying God forever with people. We will recognize there will be perfect relationships, because there will be no more death, no division, no more comparison, no more fighting, gossiping, no more sin. And that's our future, if we want it that way. Anybody ever gossip? What's the need to gossip? Does it make us feel better? Or, yes, ma'am. You had an answer. Your hand went right up. I saw it, Jasmine. Jesus himself references this himself in Matthew 6, 9, and 10. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as in heaven. So Jesus gives us these words to pray to a group of diverse people. We're all diverse. We don't all come from the same place. Working, relating, eating, loving, worshiping, going through that whole process. That's what Jesus did. And then, so kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. There can be heaven on earth. For some of us, heaven on earth is whatever we want it to be. It's our comfort zone. It's doing what we want to do. It's being where we want to be. It's pretty much nobody telling us what to do. We don't have to work for anything. We can go whenever we want to. We can come back whenever we want to. And some of us call that heaven on earth. But that's not how God intended it to be. I mean, it sounds good, but it's superficial. But that's kind of how we are in America now. And she's going through a process of showing us how we can get back to that community. And she refers to this Bible. She says, if you actually read this and you go through it, step by step, God has implanted in this how he wants us to live in every corner of the earth. And do we argue over what's in this book? We don't. But do other people, other churches? I mean, even other pastors who are in this particular Church of God denomination, even they don't have the same thoughts on what's in here. So we're even kind of diverse and divided, even within our own community. And how do you fix that? Who's going to take a stand, and who's not going to bend or back off of what is wrong? Because today, I mean, honestly, do you know what's wrong? It's like everything we used to believe is now the right thing, and everything that was right is now the wrong thing. But who's causing that? We have two entities that are controlling our lives. One is up there, and the other one is down here. And God pretty much has allowed the devil to take over this, correct? I mean, he rules the earth. And, God's just pretty much saying, okay, you can have this. And he's hoping his people will believe in him enough where, and the devil's already defeated, but we're not making things any better right here for us. And he's got his plan is his plan, and that's not going to change. But we have to change in order to make him happy. And his love is immense. We all know that. But, I can't imagine the number of times he has tears in his eyes just because he's looking at his children and how his children are acting. But we all basically have the same DNA too. We all come from basically the same base, which was Adam and Eve. We're all descendants of Adam and Eve. And it doesn't matter what color we are, or what ethnicity we are, or what educational background we have, or anything else. We all come from the same DNA. And what can we do to help a community get closer together? First of all, how many of you live in a neighborhood? Okay. Do you guys know your neighbors? Are you real close with them? I mean, I don't mean to say hi and good to see you. How are you doing? I mean, do they come into your house? They were eating with you? That's good. That's the way it used to be. Not in our neighborhood. So that's because you're one of these blessed people that lives out on the water. So you and the disciples can get in your boat and have a good time. The United States is in the western part of the world. Am I right in that? My geography accurate? And then there's the eastern part of the world. The eastern part of the world is now considered to be more community-oriented than we are. And because we are now thought of as arrogant, self-centered, individualistic people who think they are entitled to everything, and everybody thinks we have everything too, because we're Americans. So that in itself breeds jealousy too, because other people don't have what we have. Yet, in our own country, we have people that complain about it every single day. And I'm not talking about gas prices or anything of that nature or the economy. I'm talking about their rights, their living conditions, the food they eat, things like that. They're complaining about that. I challenge them to go live in another country. And I don't mean on a base where you're secluded and you're still getting food from America and everything, you're internalized with your own kind, basically. I'm talking about go out in their communities and live in their communities and see what their sanitation is like, and see what their medical care is like, and see what their taxes are like, and see what their government is like. And, just compare then. But, we've got billionaires in this country that badmouth this country. And for no other reason than money, to gain more power. So, the enemy, who we all know seeks to destroy us, he just eats this stuff up. I mean, the devil's got to be laughing every day. I mean, there's no way he can't be enjoying himself right now the way we are. The people the closer that they get to God, he's the one that goes after them the hardest, because he knows that's trouble. The people who are already weak, he pretty much leaves them alone because they're already done to begin with. But if you are really in the Word and you are really a believer of God, the devil is going to hit you with every doubt conceivable. He's going to tell you, no, you can't do this. No, you're not able to do this. It's impossible for you. You're not going to make it. You're not good enough. He'll throw things at you that you have no control over, and it's like you get hit one time after another to the point where you ask God, why is this happening to me? And some very wise men once told me, have you ever thought that maybe God is doing this so that you can get even closer to him? And I never thought about that. But when we get in trouble, what's the first thing we do? I mean, hello? Help? Why, God? Can you pull me out of this situation? Show me how to do it. I'll do anything for you. I'll never eat another piece of candy. Lance would never say that, but that's pretty much how it works. And honestly, if the devil knows he can get you alone and in the dark, he pretty much knows he's going to get you. And he wants you isolated. And he wants you to be in self-doubt all the time. And there are people who are so lonely that if they travel from place to place and they have to fly and they land in an airport, they don't know who to call to pick them up because they don't have anybody. That's how isolated they are. They don't have any family. They don't have anybody to depend on. They don't have anybody to call. And the devil loves this stuff. So we have taxis. We have Uber. We got all kinds of pickups now. So we're pretty much still feeding into that isolation, even here. And it looks like it's a real positive thing, but it's kind of sad. It's convenient, but guess what? That's what he wants. He wants everything to be as convenient for us as possible so you don't have to depend on who? God. That's exactly right. So after all of this stuff, how in the world do we fight this stuff? How do we fight the devil and humanity? Humanity's got a lot of devil in it. So how do we repair this? How do we build a village? How do we start this process? And it's really very simple, but we don't want to do it. But how do we do it? If you want to start a club or an organization, what do? You advertise? You go tell somebody this is what I want? Okay. Yeah. How do you get people in church? You have to invite them, but how many people always invite people to church? I mean, it goes back to one of the things that you said. They're afraid to, or one of the things Chris said. They're afraid they're going to get rejected, or they're going to get laughed at, or they're going to get put down. But you think about Jesus and the disciples. Did Jesus ever get laughed at? Did he ever get shunned? Did he ever get pushed around? I mean, did he ever get contradicted? I mean, if you think about what Jesus went through, and he still kept a smile on his face, and the thing that amazes me is he still kept love in his heart because he believed in the Father, and he knew he was doing the Father's work. But we're so individualized now, and we're so entitled now, and we're so into our own little worlds that we don't want to step out of our box because it would be uncomfortable. Kind of like me standing up here. Uncomfortable. But, sometimes you got to do things that are uncomfortable. Did you, when you were kids, did any of you ever get a spanking of any kind? Or? Yeah. There used to be this thing, spare the rod and spoil the child. Well, now it's spoil the child and spare the rod. So, yeah, and you know what? We always can take everything to extremes, and we've done that in this world today now, haven't we? I mean, everything's extreme. And it's pretty much everybody does whatever they want to, and there's no unity. There's always dissension. People are always arguing. People are never satisfied. And a big thing is people just don't love on other people. And usually, if you do that, people appreciate it. I can't tell you the number of times where I've gotten in the elevator with a total stranger, people I've never met, or two or three of them. And you ever been in an elevator and as soon as the door closes, everything goes, shh. Have you noticed that? As soon as the door goes, wonder what that person's thinking. Wonder what that person's saying. Wonder what that person does. And then you say, hey, how you guys doing? And everybody goes, oh, we're doing great. How are you? Blah, blah, blah. And then you start having a conversation. But you go from like in a morgue to having a conversation just because one person said, hello, how are you doing? Where are you headed? And that's all it takes. We don't want to do that. We're afraid somebody's going to look at us like we're crazy, or worse, they're going to pull a gun on us, and because stuff like that does happen. But most people have gotten like that because of how horrible society has gotten. And we think it's the majority of people, but it's not. It's the smallest population of people who are doing the largest amounts of damage. Exactly. And we have gotten that way, Dave. We have, everything is we think the worst. We're always preparing for the worst. I was like that for many years, and part of me still is, because I've been conditioned to be that way. But that's not the way we're supposed to be either. God didn't put us here to act like that either, because he wants us to trust in him no matter what. And we've gotten so caught up in the world that we can't do that. Ephesians 2, 1 through 3. As for you, you were dead in your transgressions and sins, in which you used to live when you followed the ways of this world and of the ruler of the kingdom of the air, the Spirit, who is now at work in those who are disobedient. All of us also live among them at one time, gratifying the cravings of our flesh and following its desires and thoughts. Like the rest, we were by nature deserving of wrath, for it is by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not from God, not by works, so that no one can boast, for we are God's handiworks created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. In advance for us to do. So the good works are supposed to be what? I still can't hear you. My hearing's bad.
God's will for our lives.
Exactly. Good job. And anybody ever had a bad day? Really? I've never had a bad day. Usually we look back and say, I'm lying. You know that, because we do lie. I look at when did I have a good day, and what constitutes a good day. For some people, it's just they made it through the day. I mean, that's it. That's a good day. You're still alive. You're still living. That's a good day. For others, it's got to be something where they've been praised, rewarded, or something special has happened to them. Exactly. And it doesn't have to be anything big. It's just that they got something done that they've probably been putting off or procrastinating with. And God does redeem the brokenness of all the relationships in your life. I mean, it's incredible, the power of God. 2 Corinthians 5:18. All this is from God, who reconciled himself to us through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. So here again, God's telling us, if you have fault with someone, reconcile with them. Make up with them, apologize with them, and move on. And again, that's showing love. And God said, I'm going to save you, and I'm going to restore people back to me. So he knows he's lost a lot of his sheep, but he also knows that there are shepherds in his flock who are capable of bringing the sheep back. He knows that, and he's seen everything anyway. But he's given us the opportunity to do it, kind of to tell him we appreciate him for what he did for us. But right now, we're at a stage where I don't know if too many people appreciate God for anything. They're expecting the government to fix it for them. They want free money. They want free food. They want free gas. They want everything free. And I mean, I don't know that that's conceivable or possible, but at one time, in time, it was true. In heaven, with Adam and Eve, it was true. In the Garden of Eden, it was true. And, you know, I look it back and I think about those two, and I said, man, y'all were idiots. And they didn't know it. I mean, they were so naive and so blessed and so cared for, they didn't realize how good they had it until they didn't. And have we ever heard that one before? You got something great right in front of you, and then you complain about it, and they leave, and the person that replaces them is really bad. And then you start complaining about them, and I wish so-and-so was back, and blah, 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 blah. But we're the ones that ran them out in the first place. We see it in the church all the time. To be a pastor today, a full-time pastor, your constitution has to be rock hard, and your faith has to be unbreakable, because people are going to hurt you. Even the best-hearted people, they can hurt you simply because they don't like something you said, or they don't like the way something is done. Or in church, I don't like the way the praise team sings. I don't like the music they play. I don't like the process in which we go to church. Church is too long. You know, I've got things to do. I mean, we always got some excuse because, again, we're independent, isolated, entitled at what we do. Acts 17, 26 and 27. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God and perhaps feel their way towards him and find him. So basically, every person on the face of the earth was designed for a purpose, and that purpose was to get back to God. That's all of us. It doesn't matter who we are, where we came from, or what we do. But we have segmented so much of our lives into separation and being in our own little world and living in our own little comfortable settings. And we don't even think about helping other people. And if you think about it, when people in this society now are giving something, they'll still find a way to cheat or to get more and not appreciate what they have. And they'll fake ways to get jobs, again, because we have enabled them to do so. And we've taken God out of everything to appease just a small group of people. And we've just gotten away from how God wanted us to be. Ephesians 4:32, you can forgive because you were forgiven, and love because you were loved. That's how God is. And the cool thing about Jesus wasn't just because he came here to save us from our sins, but he also wanted to be an example to us for what humankind could look like to God. He wanted us to see how he was, and it was because of that, it was another way for us to learn how to respect God and to appreciate God. Because when we looked at Jesus, he was perfect. No sin, ever, no matter how much he was abused. And so he was showing us how to be. He was showing us how to live, how to act, what to do in order to please God. That's the other reason he was here. And people just think he just came down here to, save us from sin. Yes, that was huge. That was massively huge, but that was not the only reason that he came here. And, the basic thing is, we started with Adam and Eve, and then God was three within himself, and then Jesus came. He had 12 disciples? And then Luke 10, 1 through 20, the Lord appointed 70 more people, but he sent the 12 disciples out 2 by 2 so that they could go out and they could bring disciples to them. So, Jesus said, the harvest is truly great, but the laborers are few. And if you look at church and you ask for people to help or do things like that, the masses aren't doing all the work. It's usually the same people over and over who are doing everything. It's the same people. And the rest of us get comfortable sitting back, letting those same people do everything, so we don't have to. But we all want to be fed the Word of God. But we don't want to do anything to help. And then we'll complain about, people aren't, they don't come up to us, and they're not kind to us, and they don't welcome us, and we don't feel welcomed. And I'm thinking to myself, what did you do to make yourself feel welcome? Did you go up to somebody and say hello? Did you introduce yourself to somebody? Why is it always somebody's got to go up to you? Because when we want something done, we'll send out emails, we'll text people, we'll do all this, but again, you can hide behind those things. But when you call somebody on the phone, you talk to them person to person, it's a lot different. It's hard to turn somebody down that way. But we don't even take time to do that. We use these quick release opportunities through text and email because we can do a large group of people at one time quickly, so it lessens our load. When, it would take a little bit longer to actually call people up to check on them, but do we do that? Some people do, but the majority don't. So, we've got to kind of motivate ourselves to do better too. And, this loneliness issue, we have counselors, we have psychologists, we've got drugs, we've got all kinds of quote unquote scientific, educated opportunities to help people. But if you can believe in this above all else and get the added supplement that we have here on earth, there's no telling how quickly you can be healed and all your issues can be gone. But we have to support each other too. And a lot of times we just don't take the time to do that. And understand this, and this is probably one of the last things I'm going to say. Being here on earth and being a person of God, it's not always about pursuing your own happiness. I know that's how we're taught, particularly in the United States. Pull your bootstraps up, get tough, get it done, go get it. That's what we hear all the time. That's what I used to hear every day. I'm sure that's what Dave used to hear every day too. Suck it up. If you can't do it, too bad. Find a way. It's not like that anymore. And here again, that's that individualism that was built into a lot of us when we were coming up. And today, that individualism is even greater because of how things are with our kids and how our educational system is and how the world is. So it's not getting easier, it's getting tougher. And it's only gotten tougher because people don't want to do anything. So that's kind of where we have to go with this. But this plan is a good one. And if you really want to follow her process, it's a 7-week plan. It doesn't take 7 weeks. But she's assuming that if you go through one section at a time, 1 week at a time, it gives you a chance to further research additional supplements about what she's already said. So that's kind of an introduction to that book study that you can go to, and it's actually a good one. I went through it, and everything is biblically based because everything goes back to this book. And appreciate your time, and hope I haven't bored you to tears, but we're done.